Fully equipped. It's just Jay Wall and Uncle Gene this week. What could go wrong?
A lot.
A lot. You know, I actually like this because for the most part, when it comes to your insights on the pod, it's generally reserved for anything robotic or, you know, wherever you're kind of just inserting yourself into the conversation. But very rarely, you just kind of like, you don't really just talk on the pod. You kind of wait until you're asked for your opinion. So I'm actually excited for this one. Just you and me.
Well, you know, in both my professional and my personal life, one of the things I've been accused of is talking too much. So this podcast has been an exercise in restraint in which I try to be more succinct and poignant in my conversations. I don't think I always succeed, but I'm really working hard at it. But today I'm going to let her rip.
As I say, let's just let her rip today. Rip the Band-Aid off. It's Open Championship week. I am excited, except for the fact, and as maybe some people can notice as they're listening to me talk on this podcast, I'm tired, and it's only my fault. It was All-Star weekend here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so all the best players in MLB descended upon Globe Life Field, which is where the Texas Rangers play. Your 2023 World Champion Texas Rangers, if you didn't know already, by my love for my team. But I took the kids and wife. We all went to the game. We went to the All-Star game. We went to Home Run Derby, Futures game. It was a very long, like 4 days. So I am wiped. And the worst part is, with it being Open Championship week, I like to get up early and watch golf because it's one of those weeks where I'm like, man, this is so cool. Golf's going on at 4 and 5 a.m. But I don't even know if I'm able to do it. So we'll see. You went to Tahoe, though. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
How was it? You had the robot there. I saw there was some video of the robot hitting it to 4 feet?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I went from hiking in the Dolomites to a day or two off and then flying to Tahoe. And
you got to be dragging too.
Yeah, it was. These events are really interesting. It's kind of like working with a wild animal. You know, you've trained it, everything you think should go right, but you're just not quite sure. And
you could just run off the reservation.
Just run off the reservation, just take off, running amok amongst the crowd. And you've got a crowd there. I mean, you know, my sweet spot are taped events because, you know, if something doesn't go right, you correct it. Live events, no chance. You're out there. And so we were very fortunate. American Century Investments, who puts on the American Century Championship, invited us out for 2 days. We were on the range on Wednesday, and then we set up on a par 3 on Thursday and competed against athletes and celebrities. If you beat the robot, they donated $500 to medical research, the Stowers Research Institute, that is actually a 40% owner of ACI. And if you didn't beat the robot, you could donate money and take the ball as your shot. And so Wednesday was funny because we competed against people like Fat Perez, and I didn't know exactly what to call him. I didn't know if I called him Fat or Mr. Perez. It was
Mr. Fat.
very Mr. Fat. I was a little confused on that one.
Does he even have a first name? He wasn't born as Fat Perez.
They're like, hey, Fat Perez is coming over. I'm like, what do I call him? It was really kind of awkward. But Larry the Cable Guy competed against us. He was very nice. It was just kind of a hit and giggle. And then we set up on Thursday.
What was their response to going head to head against Robot?
Everybody was just blown away. I mean, you've seen it many times, but if you've never seen it and the accuracy, it's more accurate than any human, you know? And so there was a big draw on Wednesday. On Thursday, we had 25 foursomes for this first morning shotgun. And I mean, it was like, you know, murderer's row of athletes: Roger Clemens, Joe Theismann, Larry Allen, Alex Rodriguez, Trevor Lawrence, Blake Griffin, Gary Sheffield, and I mean, Aaron Rodgers. Who's that quarterback from Oklahoma who plays for Tampa? Baker Mayfield. I mean, it was just like every time I looked up, there was someone else standing there. And the robot has this audio visual component where it talks to you. And so these guys would come up and be introduced, figure out what the game was, and then the robot would start giving them the business, and it just freaked them out. And they were like looking, going, who said that? And they're looking around. Some of the best were A-Rod. And he, in his defense, I think he's kind of either a beginning or, kind of a mid-handicap golfer, but the robot hits it to within 5 feet. It was like a 144-yard par 5. A-Rod kind of thins his shot about 100 yards, and I hear him muttering as he walks away, robot was talking shit, got in my head.
I was about to say he's living rent-free in his head.
And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking that's what makes golf so insane is this guy stood in Yankee Stadium in front of 70,000, fans, screaming fans during a World Series and delivered, and, standing on a tee box at a hit and giggle pro-am that, a robot teasing him gets in his head. The other good one was Ray Allen. Robots started giving him grief, and Ray's like, oh, so it's a shit talking robot. And Ray took it seriously.
I'm sure he did. That he locks in on stuff like that.
Locked in. And I watched him and I was like, and it was this one shot. It was so funny. And we've talked about this, like differences of golf balls. Might have been a little bit of wind, but we were normally average. We lipped out twice. I almost jarred it from about 2 inches out of the, 25 shots. I mean, we were sniffing the max distance was about 10 feet. Of course, on this one shot, there was a little bit of wind and the ball drifted and it landed, and it was about a 15-footer. And Ray's like, is that all you got? And he walks up with his caddy, and they must have stood over that ball for 4 minutes discussing it. And he stuck it to within 5. It beat the robot. And it's so cool to watch these guys because you just realize, I mean, they're the apex predators, this is something that means nothing, but he took it as a challenge and stepped up and hit the shot. And it's like, wow, you guys are good. You're good at different sports because of what's between your ears and, how locked in you are. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was successful, but I'm like you. I'm like, man, I finished that on Friday and I was just like, whoa, still kind of playing catch up, but doing great. Glad to be here and glad to be talking about the Open.
If anybody's going to beat the robot, it's going to be Jesus Shuttlesworth. For sure. Yeah, only Jesus.
He's got a sweet swing.
He's got a great swing. Has he ever told you, or have you ever talked to him about how he got into golf?
No.
So we had Ray on the pod. It's been a while, and I should probably just bump up that interview. It was a great one, and he was at UConn, and some of the golf guys were talking to him, and it's like, hey Ray, you can play any sport, but you can't play golf, man. You're never going to be good at golf. And so he took that as like an affront, like, oh, you don't think I can play golf? So he started playing, and I think he said he was down in his first year to like a single-digit handicap.
It's
just, I feel like that's not the norm even for athletes. I mean, we've seen the guy from the Jets, Sauce Gardner, who apparently is now just obsessed with golf. And I mean, you see it. These guys have great action and good hand-eye coordination, but to go in your first year down to a single digit is just, it's depressing.
I was fortunate enough. I played in this event in October. Foresight Sports invited me up. It was a Hall of Fame SEALs event where you got teamed with a Hall of Fame.
I remember talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I got hooked up with Marshall Falk, and I was talking to him one night about his golf experience. And it was funny. I talked to 3 or 4 NFL players, and they were almost all the same. And it was the same situation for Marshall. He showed up at an Eric Dickerson event, just wearing jeans and a T-shirt, didn't know anything about golf. And this tour player said, "I bet you can't hit it 100 yards." And he got pissed. And he walked up. Guess what? He couldn't hit it 100 yards. He got so pissed, he went back and found a pro. And this pro, he told me, said, "All right, you're only going to hit balls with me. You're not going to hit balls with anybody else. You're not going to go on a golf course." This guy was just like kind of, a little bit of a dictator. So Marshall followed his plan for 3 months. The first time that he ever went out on a golf course, he had no idea how to score or anything. The pro kept score. He shot a 90. And kind of same thing. And I think he's a 4 now. He's a golf sicko. I was on the bus, and there was this receiver from Miami. Same thing. He was giving the golfer shit, after lunch one day, and they're like, "You can't get the ball in the air," and he couldn't. And as soon as these guys get challenged,
yep,
man, it's all over, because they do have the athletic skill, and more importantly, they have the drive, which is really wild.
Yeah. It is wild, but again, like I said, it's also depressing how quickly they can just pick up the game and become good at it. All right, so we're going to get into open talk here in just a second. Before we do, I want to let you know that Fully Equipped is brought to you by our good friends at Golf Pride and their extensive line of grips. We're not talking about club grips, also putter grips, including the reverse taper grip that comes in a flat, pistol, and round version. And oh, by the way, did you know this? One of Golf Pride's grips, not the one that you would probably expect, was front and center last week for 2 wins. One at the Genesis Scottish Open, and then one also in Kentucky on the PGA Tour. Robert McIntyre was a winner with Golf Pride's Z-Cord grip, and Harry Hall, also a Z-Cord guy. You don't see a lot of talk about Z-Cord, because we're constantly, and I feel like that's probably our own doing on this podcast. We spend a lot more time talking about reverse taper and Tour Velvet, which is the most popular grip on the PGA Tour. And then we're also talking about multi-compound, which was the grip that Rory McIlroy helped popularize back in like 2010, 2011, I would say. So don't forget that the Z-Cord is also an option out there. It comes in a cord version, also comes in a line version if you like that ribbed feel along the backside. That's going to help you kind of just figure out where your face is in relation to impact. Anyway, if you want to learn more about Golf Pride's grips, go over to golfpride.com. Check it out. Again, extensive line of grips, and thanks again for sponsoring Fully Equipped. All right, Gene, let's get into, I'm going to say he's probably the most talked about guy in professional golf right now. That'd be Bryson. So he's coming off a win at the U.S. Open, has a chance to go for his second win of the season at the Open Championship. And in typical Bryson fashion, he shows up on the range this week, and they have a persimmon driver. And Bryson's usually locked in early in the week. You've known him for a little while now,
mm-hmm.
But he's one of those guys where if there's something fun on the range for him to hit, he's got to hit it.
Oh yeah, especially Monday.
Monday, Tuesday of an Open Championship week. Even though it's a major, he's still trying to have some fun. So Bryson gets handed a persimmon driver. And apparently this is the same persimmon driver that Rory McIlroy hit at the Renaissance Club, which is where they play the Scottish Open. And the first thing Bryson asks as he's swinging it is how fast did Rory swing it? Because he's looking for like ball speed here. Like what kind of ball speed is he getting? And there's a launch monitor there, and Bryson's taking cuts. And you could automatically tell the second that he asked how fast did Rory hit it. Like he's this is a competition now. Kind of going back to the same thing with pro athletes and learning the game of golf. He's a competitive guy. So he starts swinging. He gets it up to 182, Gene. And I mean, that's just for it. Yeah, this is with a modern ball and a persimmon head, but 182 with a steel shafted driver is just stupid.
Well, it's stupid too because I can guarantee his spin was right around 3,000, if not a
Yeah,
little higher. That's the incredible part. You lower that spin by, 800 RPM, and you get that up to 185, 186. I mean, just the spin alone is slowing that golf ball down so much. But it reminds me when I was working with Bryson at the last Open at Torrey. It was so funny. So he's got his GC quad there. He's just smoking balls between 190 and 200. And guys would walk up to him, and I'm standing back about maybe 6 feet, 7 feet. And I would watch guys walk up to him to say hi to him. Guys like Rom, JT, Spieth, all these guys would just come up and say hi to Bryson and just a little chit chat. But as they were talking, I watched all of them, and their eyes would glance at the quad to see what the ball speed was.
yeah,
And then I watched guys that were standing behind him looking over his shoulder at the launch monitor. So I mean, everybody is curious where Bryson's at and what he's at. And you know, as you're there week in and week out, the difference between winning and losing is so razor thin. And it's the same reason that putters are chased, balls are chased, driver heads are chased. When someone's successful, it might not necessarily even fit their game, but if someone perceives that someone else has an edge, they are really going to investigate that edge. And so they're all kind of keeping a sly eye, but an eye nonetheless on Bryson and how fast he is, because they know what the difference is when they're out on the course. And if you're half or a club longer than he is into a green, that could be half a stroke or a stroke when the round's over.
yeah. So there were some interesting conversations that were going on as Bryson was swinging this. He was talking to Ricky Fowler, and as they're talking, Rick says to him, like, "Hey man, this is pretty cool. Like I would love it if we would actually play a driver like this." And I'm pretty sure he means like for one event a year. I don't necessarily know if that the context of that comment to Bryson was let's play it all the time, man. But Bryson said, I'd be down. I'd be in on that. So again, it's easy to say when you know that you don't have to play a driver, and I don't think it would necessarily be persimmon, but there has been some chatter here recently, especially it was right after the USGA and the RNA came out with their golf ball rollback proposal, and there was a little note kind of jammed in there at the bottom that said that they were going to take a closer look at the driver. And I know there are some people out there. One of them's not on the pod this week, who has pushed for a smaller head size on the driver. And what could that do? And I don't necessarily know if that's going to happen, but it does make you wonder when you see guys hitting these smaller headed drivers, like what could happen. I mean, we've seen mini drivers. I would think that if they came out with something, it would probably be smaller in head size than a mini driver, but it's always a possibility. I think it just makes for good fodder more than anything else. Just seeing guys like this hit persimmon on the range and wondering like what would happen if there was one tournament out of the year where you forced them to hit persimmon wood off the tee.
Well, there might be more than one tournament. If you saw Dr. Steve Otto, the RNA, at the World Scientific Congress of Golf recently, made a statement, during his speech that they're investigating MOI properties on club heads, and he said that they've been researching this. But the interesting part is he did come out and say, at least at this point, that if it was applied, it would only be applied to the professional ranks. Yeah. So
as it should be,
right? But there's, my stance on it. But there's still they're still looking at it. And speaking of that, I was just at an OEM a couple of days ago, major ball manufacturer OEM, and I said we were talking about the robot and everything, and I said, what kind of speeds do you guys run? And he said, 120, 172 miles an hour ball speed. And I said, do you crank it up very often? And he goes, no. And I found that really interesting. Take it for what it's worth, but I don't know how many of these OEMs are testing for this new ball limit. That what are we? Year and a half out, 2 years out. I can't remember. When does it hit for the pros? 27? Is that it?
2028.
Okay.
I think it's 28, and then 30 for there's the grandfather clause for everybody else. So,
but it was just this wasn't an official statement out of the company or anything like that. Yeah. I just found it interesting. It does, and maybe they're behind the curve. Maybe the other companies are ahead. I don't know, but it sounded like in talking to this person that it was business as usual, not we're, devoting a lot of resources to try to develop a golf ball for this.
Are they betting on the possibility that it's not gonna happen?
I'm just sharing what I heard.
Yeah, that's
all.
Yeah,
and I just found it interesting because, it's going to take a while if they do decide to design for that new speed. To develop golf balls that kind of minimize the distance loss for the average players, but and who knows, maybe they're modeling it at this point and not testing it. But yeah. I just found that a little interesting to see where the industry was as far as their, kind of, or at least in this regard, this one company in regard to their preparation for, what's to come.
Yeah. Well, very quickly, I actually also spent time recently with a major OEM who manufactures golf balls. And
aren't we both just coy today?
Yeah, but I
spent time with a major manufacturer.
It's kind of throwing it out there. Yeah, and I can tell you that they're actually the opposite. They've been doing a lot of testing on different prototypes, and one of the folks inside their R&D team told me that they had recently tested a prototype, and they were used to carrying a bunker. Good player, by the way. They're used to carrying a bunker on a particular hole that they played a lot, and they said that they were using the prototype and they could not carry the bunker. So it just, again, it's a little food for thought there. You've kind of heard some of the pros. I think it was Keegan and Bryson was talking at one point about testing prototypes, and I don't know where they're getting these prototypes from, but I know that they are out there, and yeah. It also kind of checks out that they're seeing noticeable distance loss, and this is not for somebody who's a pro.
It's interesting because Bryson's attitude, what he stated publicly and kind of what he's told me is, bring it on. I'll beat him with whatever, I'll still be the longest. So
that should be the mindset, I feel like, especially for the pros. I don't necessarily know that that's the mindset for the amateur golfers. They're going to have to adopt this, but yeah, I would think that's what you would want to say is bring it on, regardless of what rules and restraints or restrictions you're going to give me. I'm going to still figure out a way to beat the guys in a head-to-head battle. So speaking of Bryson and his driver, there was it was a weird announcement, Gene. I'm just going to throw it out there. Weird announcement. No heads up, no nothing. LA Golf comes out and announces that they are partnering with Bryson to co-design a driver that's going to be released in 2025. And the driver is co-designed with Bryson and Jeff Meyer. Jeff Meyer he spent over a decade back at Titleist. He was heading up their metalwoods division through, I believe it was like 2007. Now he has his own company, but he is going to be working with Bryson on this driver. I was expecting, if you're going to do a release and announce that you're coming out with something, you would assume that you have a final product. But Gene, all I'm seeing when I look at this is just pictures of a basically an outline of a driver head, and there's a very heavy shadow on it. So I don't know what it looks like. Bryson's still playing his crank driver, the one that he used to win at Pinehurst, the one that he used to set records out on Live. It's that driver. So he doesn't have the LA Golf driver in, but it's coming, and they're saying kind of what a lot of manufacturers are hoping to do, that they're going all in on this concept, and the result is a game changer for golfers chasing the holy grail of gaining distance while decreasing dispersion. That's it. And that's all we're getting. I even reached out again just for some further info from LA Golf, and they said this is all we're given. Driver's coming out in 25. So I can't tell you much more than that. Maybe you know more.
What I can say is kind of the history of Bryson and driver designs. Number one, he knows more about driver heads and designs than probably the rest of golfers put together, professional golfers. I mean, most golfers, they see what's put in front of them, they hit it, and they give their feedback on it. Bryson has gone so into the weeds, and it was really unfortunate, kind of especially the way the relationship ended. But manufacturers, for the large part, make golf clubs for chops. They don't make golf clubs for tour players. They accommodate tour players, and they have, designs or lofts or better player club, because once again, everything's on a spectrum. And so the better players clubs can also be used by tour players. And for the most part, that relationship has worked just fine over the history of equipment and professional golf. Bryson kind of blew the ceiling off of that and started hitting the golf ball at speeds that simply have not been seen by any human. Well, let me take that back. Long drive guys maybe, but any competing humans in the marketplace. And so you had this real challenge for Cobra. Cobra is supposed to design golf clubs for mostly amateur golfers with a nod towards professionals that fit within a certain speed range. And so they were really, put into a difficult position in that they had to try to adapt what they had for kind of this new frontier that nobody knew about. And to be honest, it would have required a tremendous amount of resources for ultimately one person. I mean, very few people were swinging that fast. So I understood both sides of the equation, but at the same time, Bryson wanted to win, and he knew that there were limitations. So they split, and Bryson came along. Was introduced to this crank driver, and this crank driver has some physical characteristics that are totally different than the majority of the drivers out there in the marketplace. And some of them are extremely beneficial for high swinging players. And he went out and shot a 59 with it. And, I talked to him about it, talked to him about the construction. And for the most part, the driver has worked really well. But I knew that Bryson, being Bryson, he was going to want to do better. And he has a relationship, and he uses the LA Golf shafts. And I am not surprised by this at the slightest, because
I am. I'm surprised. Really? Yeah, because he's been having so much success with the crank driver. I am surprised that he's trying to design his own. I would have figured if he was going to do it. And you're right, he's got a relationship with LA Golf, but I guess I figured that he was going to do something with crank.
Well, think about it. It's a win-win. LA Golf
for sure.
expands their Yeah, and no offense to Crank, but Crank's a small company that is focused mainly on long drive guys. So they don't. I don't think they have the marketing budget that a LA Golf would have. It takes a lot to get a driver into the marketplace and to move the needle at all. And even if you design the perfect driver with Crank Golf, it might not be economically viable because it's simply it's just simply not going to be enough marketing dollars to get out there to let a lot of people work or know about it. And so, LA Golf has done a big push this last year into the golf balls. They've got a solid shaft business. So, the relationship works. The relationship also works for this reason. Bryson likes smaller companies that he can, go one-on-one with individuals, from a design standpoint. The bigger companies, I think, are like kind of, hey, and that's where Cobra, being a mid-sized company, I think really accommodated him. Whereas the Callaways, the TaylorMades, and the Pings, they're like, take it or leave it. We've got a stable of players. And so it makes sense for me on a number of different levels. And, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what he's going to come out with for his own driver, but also how that translates to the average golfer and what those benefits are.
Speaking of Bryson and drivers, do you think he's going to hit a lot of drivers this week at Royal Troon?
We were talking about this before we came on, and what did you say it was, 2007?
It was 2006 at Hoylake when
okay.
Tiger hit just one driver. That was just the 2-iron.
And the weather conditions are looking similar. It's just going to be cold, nasty, and windy out there. I don't know. I mean, Bryson can hit his, I don't know what his lowest club is, a 2-iron or driving iron, but he can hit that a mile too. But, to win at the Open, you've got to hit fairways, and you just can't afford to go sideways and let that ball run. I'd be shocked if he's that aggressive. This is the one tournament that he's really struggled at. I know he's missed the cut a number of times, and he's playing so well and he's putting so well that he's got a shot, but he's also got to kind of keep it under control, as far as off the tee. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think even for a guy like Bryson, he's just going to have to live with laying back and figuring out. There's just so much that can happen, and a lot of it's just kind of luck of the bounce at an Open Championship, which I think 100%. Is great. So, if you take driver, you just run the risk of, even if you think it's in a good spot, it could get a weird bounce and you could end up at a pot bunker or the gorse or, any number of spots. So I think that's why you've seen, even speaking of Tiger, this week he announced that he was going to be strengthening the loft on his 3-iron. He plays that P770 from TaylorMade. He's going to be strengthening the loft on a 3-iron by 1 degree to just give him a bit more rollout. And I think you're going to see utility irons become a very popular option. Again, it really does depend on the weather conditions, but I think you're going to see guys just play it safe when needed and then take driver where they really feel like they've got a chance and nothing's going to happen. But Royal Troon's a really tough test. So I think that's why you're going to see guys just take the prudent play off the tee instead of just trying to rip drivers all day long. And I think that's going to include Bryson. One other Tiger note. I don't know. Gene doesn't go on social media all that often, so I don't think he saw this. But I posted some pictures, courtesy actually of Golf's own Claire Rogers, who gave me a little bit of a heads up on this. Getty Images posted photos of Tiger's lob wedge. And Gene, I got to tell you, I know you didn't see this thing, but
yeah, I saw it, asshole. I'm not like 90. I know what Twitter is, and I know what Instagram is, and I actually follow our feeds. All right, I have teenagers, Gene didn't see it. He was taking a nap
I
after
just
his
don't want to. I don't want
Geritol
to
was
assume anything.
kicking
Gene. I
in.
don't want to. I don't want to assume
Dear
anything. So,
God. Yes, I saw it. And I saw your comment leading
uh,
into your story that you wrote, thanks to my testing results, that it doesn't matter. Yes, I saw the whole damn thing.
okay. Wow.
Stealing your lead. Thank you
Clapping
very
back
much.
on a Wednesday. It is interesting though. So there's your there. We don't even have to discuss that because I was going to mention the robotic testing that we ran with you, which showed. I mean, it was what, like less than 50 RPM difference in
No,
spin.
it's just there's not a lot of difference.
Yeah.
It's I don't want to call
Meaning
it
the rust for people that are listening to this.
Right.
Going, what the hell
Yep.
are you talking about? Yeah, a rusty.
Why are these two guys yelling at each other?
A rusty wedge versus a plated wedge, meaning a wedge that has a coating over the raw steel that allows it to stay in relatively pristine shape when you're hitting it, versus the raw steel, which is once the oxygen hits it and it gets with the elements, meaning water or in the bunkers, it's going to start to rust. Anyway, continue.
And you know what's interesting about it? What's Tiger now? 48.
Yeah.
Roughly. He's of that age where he grew up with rusty wedges, spun more. This was all pre-launch monitors and things like that. And I mean, not to get into his head, but I guarantee you a rusty wedge makes him feel better, makes him feel like it's grip. You hear all of this tour speak. Oh, the ball stays on the face. It really grips more. No, it really doesn't. It RPMs are RPMs. But there's something about between the ears. If you feel confident, when you're striking that golf ball, that a rusty wedge is, giving you a little bit more control, you're going to stick with a rusty wedge. And I don't blame you. I mean, number one, it's not hurting you. And if it gives you confidence, hey, it's worth a clean wedge. That's all I can say. But from a data standpoint, there's not much of a difference. I mean, they look cool.
Yeah, I mean, it
was a cool picture.
Yeah, it's a cool photo. So it's interesting. I actually reached out to Greg Cesario, who heads up wedges for TaylorMade, because I just wanted to know. I'm like, look, man, what are you guys doing over there? I've never seen a wedge with this much rust on it. And this is when I saw this picture, I like high school Jay Wall was very envious because I tried my best to get my wedges back during like the Scotty Cameron oil can days. I tried my best to get my wedges to look like this, and it could never get this layer of rust. And it's uniform and it looks cool. Anyway, so I asked him, like, hey, what are you guys doing with your wedges now? Like, this is a lot of rust. Can you explain what's going on here? And Greg reached out actually this morning, right before we recorded the pod, and he said, I have never seen a tour player's wedge have that amount of oxidation on it unless they left it outside in very humid or wet conditions for a few days or so. Well, Tiger lives, on the water in Florida. So, I mean, maybe he left it outside. But Greg said if they are playing with it on a regular basis and cleaning and wiping it down, that would not usually happen. He believes that it's an older wedge that Tiger hasn't used in a while, because one of the other changes Tiger was talking about for this week is a potential change to the 60 degree. If you recall, going back to the U.S. Open, Tiger had some new TaylorMade prototype, MG4 prototype wedges. They had Proto stamped on the head. And Tiger said that for this week, he is toying between going with less bounce just because of the firmness of the turf at Royal Troon, or, if you go with less bounce, one of the drawbacks is that you're going to have, unless you're a tour pro, you're going to have a little bit more difficulty getting that ball out of the bunker consistently, because bounce, as we've talked about on this podcast, is your friend, especially in the bunkers where you're looking to just throw that head at the sand and dislodge the golf ball, but you're also wanting to make sure that head, as it strikes the sand, that sole is hitting the sand and then bouncing out. And when you're going with less bounce, there's always a possibility, as Tiger had said, for excessive digging. And that's what you do not want, especially in an Open Championship, where if you're in a bunker, you need to get that thing out. You can't be fooling around with it and getting it close to the bunker faces, because the bunker faces over across the pond are unlike anything that you're going to see here in the States, unless you're playing a link style golf course that's set up in a similar manner. So certainly something for regular golfers to think about when they're choosing a lob wedge with less bounce, is just the potential for more digging once you get in the bunkers. But again, the rust on that head, even TaylorMade is shocked. Even the guys that design the wedges, and they're thinking it's probably an older wedge that Tiger's had around for a little bit. He just brought it over, and it just happened to have a crazy amount of rust on it.
I got a little trivia question for you.
Yeah.
Do you know the origins of bunkers, especially the pot bunkers?
Does it go back to the World Wars?
Oh, you youngins. Yeah, I have so much to teach you. Oh, the World Wars. Yes, they were German bombs created bunkers. Look at pictures of like 1898. There were bombs being dropped out of airplanes in 1898.
I don't know.
Obviously. They used to play in fields in Scotland, and the sheep and the cows burrow themselves into the ground to protect themselves from the wind. And they would dig because of the sandy bottom of the link style courses next to the ocean. And they would create these potholes that they could kind of nestle up against, because the wind, especially at night, blows 60, 70 miles an hour sometimes. And so the designers just left them in and played around them. But they're sheep and cow bunkers that they burrow themselves in from the wind, and they just became a part of the design of the modern golf course.
There we go. Uncle Gene, golf course historian.
And that's why they're so deep and small that you see over in Scotland. The American versions have widened out and flattened, but you see these just pot bunkers. And the next time, if you're ever over in Scotland or Ireland, you get a chance, you look at it and you go, yeah, a couple sheep could fit in there just fine, or a cow. And they dig down because they're big animals and they wanted to get out of the wind. So anyways, that's the reason that those
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's the reason those things are the devil's lair when you get in them, because you're, sometimes 7 feet in, standing straight up. That was one ambitious sheep that was trying to get out of the wind. So.
And you've probably seen it before, the videos that they do during the Open Championship, and it's usually before, well before, just showing how they build up the bunkers with all that sod.
Oh yeah,
it's just it is amazing to watch. I could watch those videos all day long. There's something about it, like I don't know what it is, but it's just, there's something about watching that where you're like, man, the process that it takes to get there, and then to have to like do it over again. It's a phenomenal video. If you've never seen it before, just go check it out on YouTube. Go to the Open Championships website, and they usually do it probably like once a year, just to show people the painstaking process that it takes to make those bunker faces. Okay, so before we wrap, we do have an interview this week that RB conducted with Dave Neville from Callaway, going through the brand new Opus wedges. We thought we'd talk about it this week, but you know what? Let's let Dave do that. But before we get to the interview, we want to let you know that Fully Equipped is brought to you by our good friends at Fairway Jockey and their extensive collection of, golf clubs, training aids, tech, apparel, golf balls, shafts. I mean, they literally do have it all, especially for a week like this, as we talked about, driving irons. I know a lot of you guys out there, and gals, I should say, are always wondering, like, what are the pros playing for a week like this when it comes to utility irons? The cool thing about Fairway Jockey is that if you go to their website, it's fairwayjockey.com, and you go to the clubs tab, you can scroll down, and they have a custom driving irons tab. Click it and just start scrolling, and you've got everything from the Srixon, the ZX MK2 utility iron, to the Ping Eye crossover, Titleist, even if you want like a Titleist T200, if you don't really want to go to a true utility iron, you still want to use a more traditional long iron shape, they have the T200 custom utility iron. So go check them out at fairwayjockey.com and use promo code fully equipped for 10% off. That's FULLYEQUIPPED at fairwayjockey.com. And thanks again to Fairway Jockey for being a sponsor on the pod. All right. With that, let's.
Hey.
Oh, no. What?
Who are you picking?
Oh, we didn't do picks this week.
Come on. What kind of host are you? Jeez.
Yo, this is what happens when it's just the two of us.
What kind of clown show is this?
You know what? I really like.
Oh, am I putting you on the spot?
No.
I
really like Ludwig. I didn't like the way he finished last week. I was looking at the way he was playing through 54 holes, and I thought, man, I'm liking my choice. I still think he's gonna win, but I don't feel as strongly about him as I did after Sunday at the Scottish. What about you?
So McIntyre, I mean,
Bob Mack.
Yeah. I mean,
but might as well.
I know. I mean, he's my number one. My number two is interesting, and my number two won the U.S. Open. So I'm
Bryson.
Yeah. No. But I'm not going Bryson this week. I'm going with the pissed off, vengeance-filled Rory.
You're in for some pain. I have a feeling.
Maybe we're gonna see. But
you're in for some pain, Uncle G.
Maybe. Well, I'm just stating it. So we'll see what happens. That's the beauty of these things. They're recorded. So I'm either gonna look like a horse's ass or Nostradamus. No in between.
That's right. All right. So it's right. That's on me for not doing picks. It was just the two of us. I'm used to major week. There's usually at least three of us here, so I think maybe that's what threw me off. But
Chris is in Hawaii. In Hawaii. Where's RB?
Dealing with some house stuff,
Okay.
and not good house stuff.
No.
Thoughts and prayers to RB. Anyway, all right. With that, now let's get to Dave Neville from Callaway, who was able to break down their brand new Opus wedge lineup. It's been a little while since we've seen a wedge lineup from Callaway. He gets through all the different models in the lineup. It's always fun to chat to Dave. Enjoy it.
All right, so I'd like to welcome to Fully Equipped Dave Neville from Callaway Golf. Dave, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're very glad to have you. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. But before we get into the product and what we are going to talk about, why don't you tell everybody what it is you do at Callaway Golf, your title, and kind of what your day-to-day involves?
Yeah, so I'm Senior Director of Brand and Product Management at Callaway Golf. Been here just about to hit 10 years, which is amazing. And look after a lot of the brand management and product strategy for drivers, fairways, irons, hybrids, and wedges. So a lot of the equipment categories. And the day-to-day is so varied. It's that's part of what's fun about the job. It could be anything from looking at shafts and grips for new products to working on copy and marketing, doing podcasts or content marketing with you guys as well. So there's always something new challenge every day.
Now, with those categories, is there one that is, I don't want to say easier than the other, or is there one where there is more kind of freedom to play? Like where do you find that there is one of those, or is it kind of just like ebbs and flows because each one is so unique?
They're all hard because it's the golf industry and it's super competitive, and there's a lot of great products out there. Fortunately, we have an amazing team, starting with the R&D all the way down. But Zach Oakley working for me, focusing on irons and hybrids, and then Paul Winterhalter focusing on woods and wedges. So it kind of depends. It depends on the year. Some years are super competitive on woods, and then irons years have been really competitive as well. And you talked about the freedom to operate. I think that's definitely a trend that's out there with a lot of limited edition product stuff that either is coming from the tour, that's tour driven, like our TD Maxx driver or our mini driver that we had, the Thai 340 mini driver, or just stuff that's super cool, like the tactical driver that we had that we fit some Wounded Warriors out at the memorial, and we did that as a limited edition. That's something as a former military guy that I always wanted to get over the finish line, and we finally did this year. So I'm proud of that. But yeah, there seems to be more freedom to operate, across almost all categories. Maybe a little bit harder in hybrids, but we've even done a super hybrid there, so we've had some fun with that as well.
I have to say I feel like I keep pushing it down the road because we're going to get to the topic, but the mini driver is very cool, and it's something that I know I've had the chance to test recently, and I've really enjoyed it. I think from a product category perspective, I feel like that's one of those things where it had been around for like years. It's kind of, again, ebbs and flows of like what's working. We talk about how technology kind of works its way into certain product categories, and the last time you guys had a club like that was I believe it was the Big Bertha 1.5.
The Bertha Mini. The Bertha Mini 1.5.
Yep.
Yes.
And to see the evolution of that, and then to be able to see how that has been embraced by consumers, because it was a club where, similar to when we talk about like full face groove wedges or something along those lines, when even like a super hybrid, right? Like these kind of unique clubs that they might not be for everybody, but they fit a niche target. And there's enough people out there that are in that target that it becomes an extremely useful club. And when I say target, I don't just mean better players. It can be a club that works well for golfers of all skill level.
Yeah, for sure. And we always get pushback when we launch one of these things like the mini driver, like, why are you doing this? Why are you, launching another club and all of that? But like you said, there's different people that this is a great fit for. And I think one thing that's been interesting about the mini driver is a lot more tour usage and a lot more people, better players, because a lot of the tour players, they're just hitting the ball so far with their regular driver. So the mini driver is like a secondary driver, or kind of like a 2-wood there, where when we did the Bertha Mini 1.5, which is almost 10 years ago, it was much smaller in shape, and it was almost like a glorified 3-wood, I would say, like a super powered 3-wood. And we kind of targeted it to players who weren't confident with their driver. But now the mini driver, I mean, you see them, multiple companies have them, but you see them out there on tour, and a lot of better players, because they can shape the ball with it, and it doesn't quite go as far as the driver.
Yeah, I had one. I was playing the other day, early morning. I was playing with some friends, and I pulled it out on a short par 4. There's water up there, and it's kind of in the way. And I wasn't really thinking that I wanted to try and hit this sliver of fairway down one of the sides, and pulled it out. And the first question was, "What is that?" And it was kind of like the explanation of, well, I don't really carry 3-wood anymore because this thing is more forgiving. And I think it's also been interesting to see how club fitters have kind of really changed not their tone, but like the way they've kind of changed that category of, hey, like, let's find something that's going to work for you off the tee, give you more forgiveness, and again, just give you more of those options as far as, helping you shoot lower scores in reality. But let's get to it.
Yeah,
I know.
It's launch week. It's launch week.
It's launch week. There's so much stuff. We got the Open Championship, which is very exciting. Yep. And with that as well, I know there's major championships. You had a win with these clubs already, and that is the Opus wedges, which you guys just launched. With there's not just a single product offering, but there's also the Platinum, which we'll get to. But this is an interesting one, because having been out on tour a lot, talking to the people on the truck, talking to some of the players, this has been a very long work in progress. Like, this has not been, we're going to kind of roll with the same thing and do, we're going to do some small tweaks. Like, yes, it still looks like a wedge, and we understand that, but this has been a long-term project as far as every single detail that goes into sole shaping, design, everything about it has really gone into this product.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked in the past about tour validated or tour influence. Well, this one is really, I would say, tour designed. And I think that is something that we haven't really done in the past in Callaway history. So a typical process, we would get input from the tour team, kind of make the best possible wedge, and then bring it out on tour, get the feedback, and then try to get it into play. And we said we really wanted to approach this in a different way, that we're going to have multiple prototypes. We're going to get feedback from a lot of the best players in the world, and we're going to find a shape that's going to really excite players, and we're going to try to get them in play before we even launch them. And that's exactly what we did. In fact, we had Opus prototypes in play in the 2023 Masters. So you're looking at almost a year and a half ago that we had actual prototypes in play. And then we had prototypes in play in the Open Championship, in the Ryder Cup, in the Tour Championship. And we looked at a variety of different shapes. We ended up with this shape we called S6, shape 6. And it was just one, a certain shape's not going to work for every tour player, but that they really gravitated towards, that they loved. So then we started doing, and for those who are going to see it on video, is we took the Jaws Raw and we did a Opus prototype version of the Jaws Raw with these kind of cosmetics. You can see the weight ports are faux weight ports; they're not real. And then we kind of stamped the S6 on it as kind of a nod to the shape 6. And so these tour players were really playing the Opus wedge with the groove configuration and the grinds. And all of that, but we had the Jaws Raw cosmetic on it. So we got our first win with Chris Kirk at the Tournament of Champions, where he led the field in strokes gained around the green, which was amazing. And then we got our first major championship before we had even launched it with Xander Schauffele at the PGA Championship, and then followed right after that by Yuka Saso winning the U.S. Women's Open with the Opus prototype in the bag. So to have two major championships and already have wins, we had Rose Zhang win with it before we've even launched it. It is the most tour-tested, tour-validated wedge in Callaway history.
Now, you bring up something very interesting, and I was thinking about this before we got on the call. I was like, I really want to ask about this whole thing, because understanding that this was a very long process as far as working with players and being able to create product for play, for the players, by players to be used, and then kind of bring that into like the retail environment. How is that process different? Again, being responsible for the driver category, like, I know there are R&D people working on drivers, but there's a lot of focus on face design and things that golfers don't see using artificial intelligence. On the other side, it almost feels like wedges are exactly the opposite, because yes, you could use AI to do any number of things, but at the end of the day, like that profile from address, going through, I'm going to guess shapes 1 through 6, right? It's kind of like WD-40. Why is it called WD-40? Because it was the 40th try of like this water displacement formula, right? So I think Opus is a better name than like S6.
Thank you.
But that really is like a huge difference in something like a wedge, whereas the driver is driven by, not that there's not technology in a wedge, but like artificial intelligence, but every detail from player feedback to hosel transition to just these little bits on like probably how far the grooves go across to the toe. Like, those are the details that I think it's really difficult to get a computer to kind of generate, but it's a lot easier to get that feedback from the best players in the world.
Yeah, that's a great point. Shaping is important for all clubs. So like same with the driver. If a tour player sets down a driver and the shape is weird, they don't like it, they're not going to put it into play. But on wedges, it's very, very particular. And part of that is because you have a lot of loft on the wedges, 56 degree, 58 degree, 60 degree. You're seeing a ton of the face versus a 9-degree driver. And so the look of it, the shape is so important, but then also how it goes through the turf, right? So the driver is on a tee, doesn't have to go through the turf. But when you start talking about irons in particular, and then really with the wedges, that grind and how it goes through the turf is really important. So another thing that we have is this all new grind, this T grind. So we had a C in the past, and we still have that, but we wanted to really have kind of low bounce shot makers option. So we were calling it kind of the narrow C. We had like a C and the narrow C, and we're like, oh, that's a little confusing. So we went for the T grind kind of as like a tour grind kind of offering. So this is going to be a really low bounce for the shot makers. So the look is super important, but also how it goes through the turf for the wedge.
And I guess that comes down to working with players, not just in like the day-to-day, like obviously at Ely Performance Center, which is a great place to hit short game shots. Yeah. I've been lucky to be there. It's a lot of fun, but also the changing conditions throughout the year, right? Just like this year at the Open, it's kind of one of those things we joke in the gear world of like, okay, it's the Open Championship, time to write about driving irons, taking fairway woods out of play, some low bounce wedges, and maybe some, lofting down on your driver.
But, happens every year.
Yeah. And so with that as well, like having these different grind options that have been tour tested and really performance focused as far as turf conditions, allows your players, I do think, to go through different iterations throughout the year, because the grass in Hawaii is not the same as what they're going to face this week at Royal Troon.
Yeah, so we're at the Performance Center. We have set up different bunkers. We have kind of the deep face, sod face bunkers. We have soft sand. We have firm sand, and we try to create some different turf conditions. That's difficult to do. It's pretty humid out here and softer conditions, so it's pretty hard to replicate like a British Open condition. But the wedges need to work in a variety of conditions, and people always ask us, why do you have so many different grinds? Why do you have so many different options? Well, people play all around the world. They play in different conditions and they have different techniques. So you have to have the different options for grinds.
I talked to a golfer from the UK last year on the PGA Championship at Oak Hill, and it was very funny to listen to him talk about how he brought his clubs. Most people think about, we travel overseas to go play golf on the links land. Well, he had come over here, and I think he went out the next day and ended up buying some wedges, because he went from not needing bounce to absolutely needing it. And I stuck everything in the ground in Florida for 2 days, and I realized that I had to go out and buy some new wedges. So it is pretty amazing to see that, like, not just tour level players, but even recreational golfers notice a difference when they're into that right grind shape, which is, again, why you have so many options.
Yeah, for sure. And we've got everything kind of from the low end, like I was talking about that T grind. So you better be a shot maker or playing in firm conditions. We've got a C grind, which is going to be a little more forgiving. You can still open it up. And then the S and the W, are kind of standard grind with the S, going to work in a lot of different conditions. And then if you're in softer conditions or you need kind of more help out of the bunkers, we've got a wide sole with the W. So we do feel like, and then even in Platinum, we've got a Z grind as well. We can talk about that later. We've got kind of something for everybody.
Now, let's talk about the name.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned it earlier. You had prototypes that were the kind of Opus wedges out there, but they were under the Jaws. And the Jaws, obviously, a very successful line of wedges for a number of years. What was the reason behind this name change? I think when we spotted them, I'm trying to remember what tournament it was. I think it was Texas. It was the Charles Schwab.
The Charles Schwab.
The Charles Schwab. That was a Jonathan one because he lives pretty close there. So that's he was there handling that one. But it was the first thing that a lot of people noticed was this is a name change.
Yeah.
And most of the time, the reason for name change is there is either this shift in design philosophy, which you've already talked about, or shift in technology. And can you give us some explanation about why the reasoning, being one of the brand guys, the reason behind going with Opus? And I'm not saying that you're going to retire Jaws forever, but why Opus is the new name for the new wedge?
Yeah, first of all, Jaws is a great name, and we loved it, but it has been around a long time. I mean, we obviously brought it back with the Jaws MD5, but you're looking all the way back to 2008 when we've had the Jaws and the Jaws CC, and before we kind of went to the Mac Daddy line. So we really felt like I've been talking about kind of that tour philosophy and that influence to the design. Also, what we're doing with the grooves and the spin gen technology. We really felt like we needed a new brand, and the idea around Opus. I mean, obviously, people know it from the wine as well, but around musical composition is just like putting out your best work. What would be your best work? What would be your opus? So even in our taglines, we say this is our opus, right? So this is our best work. We have the influence from the tour and the shaping. We've got this new spin gen technology, all new grinds, new finishes that we haven't done before. We've got the platinum version as well. Like, this is our line. This is our opus. We're trying to make a statement with it. And also, when you have a new brand, it does take a time to build it up, but it gets people talking about it. Like, what is that name? And so far, I like to check it out there on the social media. It's been pretty positive. Usually when we have a new product, the first, I would say 50 to 500 comments are all negative, and then we sell a lot of them anyway. But this has been pretty much very, very positive on the Opus name. So, a lot of the connotations with music and wine, and you'll see that in the media side as well.
Very cool. Now let's talk about, you mentioned there, like the spin enhancement technology, like spin gen technology that's in this. The first being the change of grooves. We know that the groove rule has not changed since 2010 when they created the conformity, that they just adjusted the rule. And so with that, how has that forced your designers, your engineers, and not only that, but your partners as far as manufacturing to continue to push tolerances to the point where you're able to generate the most amount of spin you possibly can and have it, perform not just on those first 10 shots, but have it perform throughout the life of the wedge.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to get creative, and we're always going to try to innovate within the rules. I mean, that's what Callaway is all about: innovation and product performance. So on this wedge, on the sands and lobs, we've actually added 3 grooves, and then 2 grooves on the gap and the pitch. And people think, oh, you just put as many grooves as you want, but the rules are there for a reason. There's trade-offs you have to make, and so they're going to be a little more narrow pitch, so they're going to be a little bit closer together, but it's still that really aggressive wall angle. So that 37-degree wall angle, we call it the most aggressive groove in golf. And that was, like you were talking about with the manufacturers and our partners, some of the best machine shops in the world we're working with to create these wedges, and really for them to actually allow us to try it, because it is that aggressive. So we have that 37-degree wall angle, but 3 additional grooves. And how does that help? Well, as the ball rolls up the face, you have the additional grooves to kind of grab the ball as it rolls off the face. So the other thing you're going to see with these wedges is lower trajectory, both with the regular Opus and the Opus Platinum as well. So really good trajectory control, especially out of the rough, wet conditions. And that's part of that kind of spin gen phase. The other thing is we have the angled micro features. We've had that in the past. We've used that on the full toe, but proprietary to Callaway. And we really think that helps a lot of players open up their wedges around the greens. That's going to help around the greens. And then the surface roughness, really kind of trying to enhance that surface roughness, doesn't come into play on full shots. But as you get closer to the green, that's where you want to have that kind of aggressive surface roughness to really give you a little more spin and bite.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing when we talk about like the way a face is designed as far as grooves and friction and all of those things, because a wedge, we'll call it clubs with more loft in the bag.
Yeah.
I won't just say just like strictly wedges, but we can move into the 9-iron and maybe sometimes an 8-iron in some iron sets. But in reality, like a driver is designed to be squared up. No one's sitting there opening up their driver 17 degrees, 20 degrees to add 15 degrees of loft on it to try and hit a shot. It's not a thing that most people are doing. Maybe hole-in-one trick shots. He was a Callaway guy. I mean, he's pretty good at doing a whole bunch of crazy
Josh
stuff.
can do it. Yeah.
But as far as a wedge, like you not only have to engineer for direct contact if someone is lofting down the face, playing the loft as it is, opening it up, but like there's this opening up, right? Like there's this glancing blow that someone might be putting on the golf ball. And at different speeds. Someone might be swinging a pitching wedge at, let's say, a really fast player, 85, 90 miles an hour if they're very fast, all the way down to like these little tiny pitch shots. So there's almost like there's different technology built into the club face for different speeds, where grooves at very, like just a general face texture at higher speeds and the grooves, as well as into that micro texture as you get into those real low speeds, and the ball's not going to necessarily dig into the grooves like it would at a higher speed and a more direct blow, but those other ones really help it kind of, you still get that traction, which I think that's got to be a hard part of the face technology development, right? Because there are all these different ways that the golf ball interacts with a wedge face versus like something like a driver.
Yeah, you nailed it. And as you get closer to the green, more people start to open up the face and they're not hitting this kind of direct below. And the other thing is you have a ton of loft on there. So that's why we have this offset groove and groove. And for the people who are looking at the wedge face, look at it closely, you can see that those are angled micro features. So as you open the wedge up, say 30 degrees, now those are straight. So now they're coming into play. And I'm talking about on 15-yard shots, 20-yard shots. So if you're hitting a full, 100-yard gap wedge, it's not coming into play at all. But if the little chip shots around the greens, yes, that is going to help you. So that's one of the things why we did that offset groove and groove and angled micro features, and then trying to get that surface roughness to really kind of grab the cover of the ball as well.
And I mean, that kind of plays into something I've been testing as well, which is the new Chrome Tour golf ball, which has been a big success for you guys. Again, winning major championships and just overall tour usage with that golf ball has been a big hit for you guys.
Yeah, huge hit for us. The Chrome Tour X has been phenomenal. We have a lot of players playing the Chrome Tour as well, but getting wins out there on tour. So one of the things our wedge team is doing, working with the ball team as well, is like, what are the different types of balls? You know, not everybody has the Chrome Tour, right? There's other competitive balls. You know, we've got ERC out there, super soft. And how is the wedge going to react with all those different types of balls? But, you know, the Chrome Tour X, if you want to just have maximum spin around the green, that's going to be the golf ball for you.
Right on. Okay, now talking about spin, talking about launch, and understanding technology and all these different things. Along with the Opus, there's also the Opus Platinum, and the thing that obviously stands out right off the bat is it is multi-material.
Yep.
And then not only is it multi-material, there's a different way that you have decided to produce these wedges. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, you know, first off, what's the reason for being for the Opus Platinum? Well, we wanted to be kind of a disruptor in the wedge category. And, you know, Callaway is all about innovation. Like I said, innovation and product performance. So what could we do kind of from a no holds barred standpoint on a wedge? And what would that look like? So it would feature an all new construction. So this wedge is not cast. It's not forged. It's mimmed. And there's what the MIM is, metal injection molded, means it allows us to have full control over the different materials that we're using in the wedge. So it allows us to control the feel in a way that is much harder to do with 8620 or with a forged wedge as well. So one thing you're going to notice with the Opus Platinum right away is that it feels softer. It feels different than a traditional wedge. And a lot of players like that. They equate the softness with the feel of it, and the MIM is just a very soft feeling wedge. The other thing it allowed us to do is take tungsten and put a tungsten bar across the top of the wedge, something we've never done before. We used tungsten in Jaws Raw, but that was primarily to move the center of gravity away from the hosel. This is to help control the trajectory. So we have tungsten high up on the face of the wedge. You know, it's bonded in there in a way that helps us control trajectory, launching maybe 1 to 2 degrees lower, which is pretty significant versus Opus, which is already launching lower than Jaws Raw. And then the finishes, you know, a really premium kind of platinum chrome. And then we have this all new blue finish with the kind of this platinum blue finish, just absolutely gorgeous, beautiful. So premium shafts, you know, just a whole premium package for the player that wants kind of the best of the best.
And part of that too is for those who are like curious, because of this technology that you're putting into these wedges, is as far as the tungsten and the materials. There's a reason you're not doing them in like 50-degree gap wedges. They're available in sand and lob wedges because that technology really shines in that space, correct?
Yeah, and part of it is also with the trajectory. So we're noticing a lot on tour and with better players, they want that ball to come out lower with a lot of spin. They don't want the ball to balloon in the air. You know, it used to be like 60 degrees, like hit it straight up in the air and land it that way. Now you see just a lot of better players. If you see it on tour, of course, the ball looks like it's coming in hot, almost like they sculled it, and then it just hits and just grabs with a ton of spin. And that's what you can do with this Platinum. As you get down to the pitching wedge and the gap wedge, having that tungsten high doesn't always help you necessarily. You could end up with your distance gapping kind of coming up short. So that's part of it, you know. And then we didn't want to have just 2 full families. You know, that would be a massive offering. So we wanted to keep it rather tight. So we have it in the sand and the lob, and we have a Z grind, which is not offered in the regular lineup this time around. Very versatile kind of players grind. So it is a crescent sole, but it has a little bit more bounce, plays with a little more bounce. And then that S grind, which works for a lot of different players. So it's a relatively tight lineup for Opus Platinum. We didn't want to just duplicate the full line, but we really wanted to have this premium offering, premium finishes, all the best technology, and a construction we've never done before.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things I can remember, say like 15, maybe 10, 15 years ago. I don't want to date myself too much. But it's one of those things where when companies, because players wanted that versatility in their short game, they would not just use that gap wedge, and as irons got a little bit stronger, all of a sudden, you know, rather than a 52, they're carrying a 50.
Yeah.
And they don't want to carry the 46-degree pitching wedge in their set. They want to carry another wedge. And, you'd see players get these wedges, and then the first thing they would do is they take a 45-degree wedge and they'd bend it 2 degrees strong because they spun too much.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't that the technology hadn't gotten there, it just they hadn't really quite figured out the gapping to kind of control that spin. So now you've got it where I think there's a much better understanding of center of gravity shifting throughout the shorter clubs because of the way players play that shot. I think, you see it with the best players in the world all the time, and I always see it when it's kind of fun to sit on the range and listen to people watch tour players, because they'll say things like, wow, they hit their driver so high, whereas most people try and hit it lower. They think they need to drive the ball, and then they hit their wedges so low.
So low, yeah.
And it's like, no, they're doing that on purpose. Like, this is the ability to control trajectory. And it kind of comes back to the same thing with the mini driver, right? The driver at this point has become basically, I call it a ballistic weapon off the tee.
A bomber clip. Yeah.
But it doesn't work on every hole and on every golf course. So this, at the end of the day, whether we're talking mini driver or we're talking wedges, all of these little technologies are built into these golf clubs to offer golfers more control over the golf ball.
Yeah, and that's why the tour validation and the tour input and the tour design is so important, because you see trends like the mini driver, you see trends like higher CG with controlled trajectory out there, and then we're able to bring it to all golfers out there. There is a lot of golfers who think that, they should I'm going to get maximum spin from hitting the 60, with like a 35-degree launch angle. It's just not true. You're going to get maximum spin if you hit it like 29 degrees, 30 degrees. It's coming in with that mid trajectory, and it's going to hit and grab. And it also, that takes the wind out of play, which is why you see so many tour players controlling their trajectory.
So one last question, not that I know that people they're not even at retail yet, and that's not where I'm going with it. But as far as not just wedges, but club design, speaking of how AI, we talked a little bit about how AI is continuously incorporated into your product line. It started with drivers, and it works with fairways, hybrids, and irons now when we talk about Paradigm AI Smoke. But then also what you've done here with this product is really focus on player feedback. How do you see these two things working together to continue to develop products for you and the rest of your team?
Yeah, so AI is not going away, and we feel like we're the leader, Callaway, across the board. So you see like the AI One putters, the AI Smoke, and one of the things you see with the putter is they have control of the back of the face that really helps with speed control across the face. Now, the wedges are one piece, so that you don't have the control of the back of the face. But it's not to say that we couldn't use AI for design techniques in the future. And people think that like we're tapped out on design, but we're not. And I'm encouraged by things that I see in the pipeline, by what the team is doing. We've been on the AI journey for over 10 years now. So a lot of the other companies are like, oh, we should get into AI, and we've got a 10-year head start. So I feel really good about that and what the R&D team has. But with wedges, it's always going to be a blend of art and science, right? So it can't just be like the most scientific wedge of all time, but it looks crazy and nobody wants to play it, right? So that's why getting that tour feedback, both on the shaping, but also the turf interaction and the grinds, is so important. And I don't see that going away, because if you want the best players in the world to put it in play, it's got to look amazing, but it's got to perform as well.
Very cool. All right, Dave, thanks so much for talking Opus Wedge. I know we covered a lot of different topics, kind of generally where my mind tends to go, and then I just start asking questions like a squirrel that can't control what he's thinking about. So, Dave, thanks so much for your time. And again, people can check out the Opus Wedges. They're available now, or they will be very, very, very soon. And Platinum are coming in August as well, correct?
Yes, coming soon, and I think this week from when the podcast is coming out. But thanks again for having me on, Ryan. Really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks again to Dave for the time. That'll do it for episode 248 of Fully Equipped. As always, if you want more social goodness from us, check us out on YouTube at Fully Equipped Golf. And we're also at Fully Equipped Golf on Instagram. And if you are into Twitter, X, I don't even know what to call it anymore. We're at Fully Equipped. Actually, we're at Fully_Equipped. It's been a long few days, friends. I promise I'm going to be better next week. Thanks as always for listening. We'll see you around.